Welcome to part 2 of our Getting Started with RAW tutorial. And what we're going to do here is look at setting up and correcting white balance to make sure that the colours in the shot look correct. You'll find this start file on your disk. It's called DCM27, and this is a Nikon NEF RAW file. It's a different format to the Canon RAW files, but they all open up in the Camera Raw editor. So that's all you need to know. Just drag it into the Photoshop interface or drag it onto the Photoshop icon on your desktop and it'll open up in the Camera Raw editor. We can then close this window here because we don't need to see that folder anymore. So let's have a look at our photograph and see what its problems are. Well, it looks slightly too cold and uninviting. The skin tones have got a little bit of a blue palette to them, and the white background there has actually got a blue tint as well, and that's because the camera's white balance setting wasn't set correctly. And we saw in part 1 that white balance can be changed by using different presets, so we could try something like auto, and that's making it look even worse. It looks even cooler there now, so we actually have to try and adjust this manually to improve the white balance and get the whites looking white instead of too blue. So let me just set that back to as shot for the moment, and let's look at some of the tools that help us improve our white balance problem. Now let me just talk a little bit about what white balance actually means so you know what's going on when we correct the shot's white balance. Basically, to a digital camera, daylight is quite cool and indoor light is quite warm. They both have different color temperatures. So what we need to do is make sure that white in any image looks white instead of blue or orange, and that's where the camera tries to balance that particular lighting to create whites instead of blue or orange ones. So we can actually do this manually or use a variety of different tools to change the shot's white balance and make it perfect. And we're going to kick off by using this tool here, which is called, appropriately, the white balance tool. So click to select that, and then what you can do is click to sample an area that should be white or grey, and what will happen is that Photoshop will say, oh, if that's blue, I'm going to warm things up. If that's too orange, I'm going to cool things down, and it'll also change the colours of the image as a whole. So as things start, we've got a temperature of 4,700, and what we can do is click with the white balance tool to sample this white area, and you can see it's warmed up the temperature to 5,050, so that's warmed up the shot a little bit. Click here to see a before and after. There's the before, slightly cooler. There's the after, slightly warmer, but there's very subtle changes going on here. You could try something else like the whites of her eyes, and that's actually cooled things down a little bit. So depending on where you click, you'll get a different result. So let's go back to this area, click again, and that takes us back up to a warmer 5,050 degrees. Now don't get bogged down by the jargon of color temperature. Basically, the slider here warms things up as you drag it to the right, or it cools things down as you drag it to the left. That's all you really need to know. And this shot here is warmed up slightly using the eyedropper tool, but we can manually warm things up a little bit more by dragging this to the right and creating warmer and healthier looking skin tones. You can now see that the background whites are a little bit more warm than they were before. So let's see the before, much cooler, and you can see a hint of blue there. Click again, and now it's warmer and healthier. The shot still has some problems. The exposure is a little bit under, so what I'm going to do is just tweak this, drag it to the right. You can see it's brightening things up, and also the histogram there is sliding to the right at the top here and the highlights end, so we have a much healthier looking shot. There's the before, cold and underexposed. There's the after, warmer and more correctly exposed. And finally, let's have a little look at tint, because that's quite a useful tool. If a shot has got a magenta hue, like this one here, it's slightly warm and there's a little bit of magenta in there, it can give inaccurate looking skin tones. So what you can do is counteract that magenta hue by dragging it towards the green. And you're not actually tinting it green, you're just basically removing the magenta and you're creating more natural looking skin tone. So it's quite a subtle change. I've gone down to -23, whereas it was suggesting -6, and if you think that's too far, then maybe take it to around about 17. Maybe -17 will then give us more healthy looking skin tones. So there's various ways you can adjust the shot's white balance to create correct looking colors. And when you've finished editing your RAW file, you can click Done, and Photoshop will remember all of the positions of all of the sliders that you made, so when you reopen it again later, it will look exactly as it was when you last left off editing. So there we have our changes all recorded quite happily there. So there's several ways to correct color. In the next movie, we're going to put these other sliders through their paces to improve exposure. We're also going to boost color, and we'll even look at ways to sharpen up the shot to create prints with more punch. So see you in part 3.